Hi all, welcome to Parker's Reefs. On today's episode, we're going to be adding a scape to this water box tank. Hopefully an idiot-proof scape. Alright, last episode we added some substrate in sand using the Aquarium Systems Paleo sand to the water box nano tank. And the next logical thing after sand is to add in a scape. Once we add scape, we can add some water. So hopefully we can get through this episode pretty quickly because I'm super keen to get this tank wet and start the cycling process happening. But one thing I want to do first, and I skipped on it last episode, so I'm going to jump straight into it first thing on this episode, and that's to jump in some of the feedback we've had from the previous videos so that I can incorporate some of that feedback into the future episodes. So let's see what the comments are. Alright, so let's jump into those comments right now. And the first one I want to touch on is from Kevin W. He says, I enjoy your channel, keep up the good work. Scape for me should be minimal with limiting the points where the rock contacts the substrate, keeping the flow and limiting dead spots, Kev. Yeah, I think you're right. And the last thing we want to do is create this like a mound of boulders. We want to try and keep this scape as open and as flowing as possible so that we don't trap too much detritus. So thanks for the comment, definitely take that on board. We'll scroll down to the next one, which I think is probably going to be useful. Thoughts on sand and scape from Jason Scully. He gave some good points on the sand there about being sand for a beginner, yes, and that whilst he's done a tank both ways, that for a new hobbyist, the natural reef look with sand is a good way to go, and that there's so many cool inhabitant choices that you can go once you've got sand in the tank, as opposed to having a bare bottom tank. So definitely take that on board. But in regards to this episode about the rock, Jason says, live or not with a question mark. I remember as a beginner that I loved watching new critters appear from nowhere, but I also remember that algae and aptasia issues nearly drove me away. So I would avoid live rock, practice proper quarantine, inspection and dipping procedures, and start off on the best foot. And I think you're right there. Whilst it's such a pros and cons approach, we've got such benefits having live rock in all the bacteria and all the cool things that you can watch while your tank's cycling. And it also does have organics on there to help cycle your tank. It does also open up the door to so many potential risks that are really confusing for beginners. So with that in mind, I think we probably will go an artificial rockscape, and we'll take on board some of the earlier comments about keeping it really open and flowing. So thank you for the comments. And I'll see if I can find one more here. Let's have a look. Okay, here's a comment from Rod Webb who says, I'm in the process of doing the scape for my Nano, which is roughly the same size as this tank, and I have selected a box of Carib Sea live rock shapes to play around with. I have already added 1.5 to 2.5 millimeter grain size aragonite sand. I went for the life rock as I used it in my other tank and really like the structures that you can build with it. Awesome, thanks Rod, appreciate the input. I've got the scape ready to go for this tank, so tune in and let's see how we go with this scape. Okay, thanks again for the comment and feedback, guys. I really appreciate it. Be sure to keep the comments and suggestions coming because it makes this this process a more incorporated outcome. It's not just my opinions on what an idiot-proof reef tank is. It should be all of our opinions. So keep the suggestions and feedback coming. I do appreciate it, and I do make a most effort as I can to get in there and respond to every single one of them. So bear with me if it takes a little bit of time, but I definitely try to get to each and every comment that's on there. So that's from the last episode. Let's have a look at what we're talking about this episode. And we're talking about rockwork scape, and obviously I've touched on that we have to have rock in this tank, otherwise it's a fish tank, it's not a reef tank. So we've got to remember our criteria that we want this to be as idiot-proof as possible. We want it to be as maintenance-free as possible. We want the cost to be reasonable, not the biggest factor, but a reasonable cost. We don't want to just buy the most expensive thing under the sun. We want it to have as minimal impact on the environment as possible. And ultimately, we want it to be attractive and really entice new people into the aquarium. So with those factors in mind, I put on my time machine hat and I went back a few years ago when I first set up my first reef tank, and I remember it was by far, and I mean literally by far, the most daunting thing for me ever. I was fine testing water, I was fine picking a tank, I was fine picking sand even, I already knew what livestock I wanted to have, but I had no idea how to build a scape, and it was terrifying because everyone talked about how important it was, and if you get it wrong, you're going to trap detritus, or you'll get dead spots, or it'll look ugly, you'll have nowhere to stick corals, and it freaked me out. And it's one of those things that you can't just read a book or have a look at a video online and know how to build a scape. So with that in mind, I went down to my local fish shop. I went down to Dave at Deer Park and said, I've got a Waterbox 20, I need a scape. And this is what he made for me, and it's incredible. This has been made out of real reef rock out of their branching range. Now there's been 2 branches incorporated into this piece here, and a bunch of the aquarium systems purple putty, which has worked out really well. It's super strong. And the main reason why I went this way is, you've got to bear in mind, this is the idiot-proof reef tank, and I touched on how difficult it was for me to make a scape on my first tank. So when you've got access to good local fish shops, why would you put yourself through that? I gave my local fish shop the requirements and dimensions, and they built this for me, as easy as that. Now, the guys there, they know what they're doing. They use this rock because it's affordable, it's free flowing, we've got minimal contact points you can see down there. It does not impact the ocean at all, it is man-made, and it's gonna look really cool in the tank. So it ticked all the boxes. Even with the local fish shop putting this together using the real reef rock branching, which is not the cheapest rock under the sun, and using the high quality aquarium systems epoxy, and including the labor and everything in there, it still only cost me $120 Australian, which personally I think that's an absolute bargain. I'm going to encourage Dave to raise his price on that because I don't think he charged me enough for his labor. But at the end of the day, that's what I paid for this rock. And to be honest, if you're a beginner getting into this, and like I said, we're not trying to do this on the cheapest path, but if you're a beginner getting into a reef aquarium and someone said for $120, I'll make you a scape that does not impact the ocean, it'll have no aptasia or algae on it, it is attractive, it is free flowing, you'll be able to mount corals to it, you would throw that $120 and get out of there as quickly as you could. So anyway, I could talk about this scape in my hand all day, but we're probably better off having a look at it in the tank. And you may remember the last episode, I had the tank sitting on a filing cabinet in my lounge room. I pointed out that that's not going to work for long. I'm going to need to find a spot. And sure enough, I found a spot in my fish room, which is my equivalent of the Reef Studio. Let's take this scape in there and put it in the tank and see how it looks. All right, here we are in one of the final unused sections of my fish room, and the Waterbox 20 is fitting here really nice. We've got the filing cabinet as a cabinet, which works really well because I'm going to be able to store things in there. I've still got room to get to the side and behind the tank. I can still get down that side between my large frag system and this tank. And like I joked about last episode, this may well be a temporary setup, but you never know your chances. It might just live here forever. So you can see I've got my sand in there. I did actually take 2 handfuls of sand out after the last video. I had a bit of a think about it and thought, it's a little bit much. So our sand level's now down to probably about 1.5 centimeters of deep of sand, and you can see it's still nice and clean. I recorded that episode only a couple of days ago, so we're good to go. I'm gonna grab the scape and drop it in there. All right, let's make it rain scape. So I'm just gonna nudge my light out of the way so I've got as much room as possible. And I'm just gonna gently lower this scape down in there. The tank is still, I guess you'd call it dry, because whilst the sand is wet, there's nothing else really there. And we're just gonna find a nice spot to sit this down. I wanna make sure I've got enough room for magnet cleaners all the way around. I'm gonna just wriggle it down into the sand a bit there. This is where the small amount of sand I've used has probably become most evident, because there's not a huge amount of sand for it to sink into, but you can see it's quite stable in there, so that's great. I'm just gonna jump back and have a look and see how that looks. Yeah, that looks killer. We've got lots of room there. We've got lots of room under here for sand growing corals, so I can put like a fungi disc or a rhodactis on there. We've got some space here for like zoas to grow up. I've got a couple of little forks here where I could wedge something like a nice big leather or something like that in there. And I've got some other spots out here on a bit of a limb where I can put something like a torch or something like that to get some real nice flowing action. And they're nice and far away from the rest of the tank. So this scape's, in my opinion, has turned out absolutely killer. Just put the light back over the center of it so you can get a good look at it. I can't wait to get this tank wet, and that's the next episode. Really, we'll talk about what water options we use. I've got to talk about the return pump, and yeah, then we'll go from there. So I think we're probably finished in the fish room. All right, guys, that's about the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed the scape. I think it's turned out fantastic, and the best thing about it was I didn't have to do anything about it other than send my good mate Dave a message and say, I want Escape for this system, these are the parameters I need, how much is it going to cost, let me know when I can pick it up. As easy as that, and if that's not idiot proof, I don't know what is. So if you've got any feedback on that, be sure to pop it in the comment section down below. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a like, and if you're keen to see where this idiot-proof reef tank ends up, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you don't miss out on any future videos. And also bear in mind when you're putting comments in, the next episode we'll be doing will be water. I want to get this tank wet, and whether we do in the same video or whether I do another video, I've got to get a return pump in this tank because there's no use making it wet if the water doesn't flow anywhere. From there, I'll let you guys help me decide what the next video should be. Until then, thanks for watching guys, keep reefing, bye.